Hello again, Bat fans! In this episode we're going to check out the story known as The Many Deaths of the Batman. A heavy rain pours down in Gotham City and the police answer an emergency call. Two officers drive to the crime scene where they are shocked to see Batman badly injured and in a very strange position. The two officers call for an ambulance and a few minutes later they take Batman to the hospital. The doctors try to help the man without removing his costume, but despite their best efforts, they are not able to save him and Batman dies. The body is taken to the morgue, but not long after this, someone arrives to the hospital looking for the dead man. This person bribes his way into the morgue, where he is allowed to see and take pictures of the corpse of Batman. The photographer then goes to a local newspaper and sells the pictures that become their front page headlines. The news about the death of Batman reach everyone in the city, from the conflicted inmates of Arkham Asylum to the heartbroken allies of the Dark Knight. Alfred gets the news as he prepares breakfast for Bruce. Concerned, Alfred goes looking for his master everywhere around the place, but Bruce is nowhere to be found. Commissioner Gordon is out of town, but he is soon informed about the events happening in Gotham. He returns as fast as he can and he goes straight to the hospital, where he is taken to see the body. Gordon asks to be alone, and once the place is empty, he removes the mask from the corpse. This man is not Bruce Wayne. Gordon activates the bat signal, but at that moment, in the rooftop of the Gotham Plaza Hotel, a second Batman blows to pieces in a massive explosion. However, Batman is not dead. The Dark Knight is chasing down a mysterious hooded figure, but when he finally captures the mysterious person, they both fall to the river. The GCPD find Batman's body and take it out of the river. Commissioner Gordon witnesses the scene and he finds the whole thing very strange, as this is already the fourth Batman that has turned up dead in the last 12 hours. Gordon has been all over this case trying to figure out a connection between the murders and the fact that all victims were dressed as Batman. Later that day, an international athlete arrives to Gotham and goes to a fancy gym, where he will perform acrobatic feats dressed as Batman. He explains that the owner of the gym promised him a lot of money for this stunt, but the owner knows nothing about the whole thing. At that moment, the athlete is killed with a crossbow and the killer leaves only the weapon behind. The police analyze the weapon and realize that a notorious crossbow Olympic champion has recently arrived to Gotham, making him the prime suspect. Meanwhile, the real Batman delivers the hooded criminal he was chasing to the French police, who immediately let him know about his supposed death back in Gotham. Commissioner Gordon goes to interrogate the crossbow champion, but much to his surprise, he finds the man dressed as Batman, as he is ready to go to a costume party at Wayne Manor. The commissioner explains the situation to the man, and how he is in danger just for wearing that outfit. Unfortunately, the man wouldn't listen and he dies as a result of some poison in the costume. Gordon figures out a connection between the victims and he immediately goes to Wayne Manor, either to save Bruce or to arrest him. By the time Gordon and the police arrive, Bruce was already home. Gordon explains the situation and inquires if Bruce has received a Batman costume. Alfred tells them that a package just arrived and when they open it, they find a Batman costume inside. Bruce doesn't put it on, but as soon as an officer secures the utility belt, the costume becomes acid and eats through the furniture. Bruce is the first victim that didn't die, but the criminal is still out there. After the whole incident, Bruce is unable to get out of his bedroom, as there are many police officers posted inside and outside of Wayne Manor to protect Bruce from another murder attempt. However, he has already figured out a connection between the murders and has a plan to capture the killer. Alfred creates a distraction that allows Bruce to go into the Batcave and change into Batman. Bruce knows that all the victims in this strange case were all his own mentors, and that the killer must have deduced some part of the truth about Batman. The Dark Knight informs Commissioner Gordon about this, and later, he confronts the killer, who is actually another one of Batman's mentors. The criminal manages to escape thanks to an electric-charged Batman costume, which leaves Batman seriously injured. Batman goes back to the Batcave to have Alfred heal his wounds, and in the meantime, the killer, whose real name is Frederick Stone, tries to tell his wife about the situation. He explains that he had to kill all those men and dress them as Batman to give the enemies of the Dark Knight a clue about Batman's real identity. He also faked his own death to prevent the criminals from ever attacking him. But the plan has changed and now he has to hurry and kill the next victims. Stone goes out and forces his next victim to dress up as Batman, but before he can kill the man, the real Batman shows up and stops the deranged criminal. Batman deduced the killer's plan thanks to his detective skills, and he delivers the criminal to the police with all the evidence he could find. Hoping that it's all enough to lock the criminal in prison, Batman gets ready to explain the whole situation to an unsuspecting wife. That was The Many Deaths of the Batman, the first Batman story written by John Byrne, who is, for better or worse, a comic book legend. Not long before this story, Byrne was responsible for rebooting the whole continuity of Superman. In other words, John Byrne is for the Man of Steel what Frank Miller is for the Dark Knight. However, while he was big on Superman, his work in Batman is less than notable. His biggest achievement is having worked with legendary Batman artist Jim Aparo in this story. This three-part saga takes place in the Batman comics, where Byrne tells one of the most classic type of stories, a detective story. As with every good detective story, there has to be a murder mystery, and in this case the victim is Batman. This creates the perfect opportunity to showcase Batman's expert detective skills as he solves his own murder. However, things become overly complex when several Batmen start showing up dead. John Byrne did a good effort of coming up with an original detective story, but he fails to deliver a great story. One of the most important elements that any detective story should have are clues and subtle hints that allow the readers to figure out the mystery along with the protagonist. This is something that the Batman comics of the Bronze Age did perfectly well. In those books, there were enough elements that guided the reader in the right direction to solve the mystery, and if you figure it out, it's very rewarding to make it to the end and see that you were right. And even if you didn't guess, once the mystery was solved, you could go back through the story again and find all the clues that you might have missed. It gives you a feeling of satisfaction. Unfortunately, The Many Deaths of the Batman doesn't have this. By the time Batman solves the mystery, he starts giving out all the clues and answers that allowed him to find the killer. But instead of making us go, of course, we just have to witness how amazing Batman is for figuring out something that was so complex that it was impossible for us to solve. And if by chance someone solved the mystery, it's most likely out of a lucky guess. That's not how detective stories should feel. It lacks that final punch and that feeling of accomplishment or amazement at the writer's ability to give us enough to work with and figure out the mystery without spoiling the story. That's how you can tell good detective stories from the bad ones. Another thing that was not precisely good was the killer. At first, it all seemed to be part of some criminal genius, but in the end he is one of Batman's mentors and totally insane. Nothing about this character makes any sense. He figures out Batman must have trained with him, and he starts studying the Dark Knight and figures out the identities of several other mentors of Batman. That requires some real genius to figure out, except he thinks otherwise. He thinks that everyone can do it, and so he believes his life is in danger. So he starts killing all of these mentors, dresses them as Batman, and fakes his own death to give the enemies of Batman a clue about who Batman really is? What? What is all this nonsense? It's good that Byrne used the idea that Bruce trained with many experts on different fields, but having them become a plot device for this insane and absurdly complex plot is unnecessary. So if that was the best John Byrne had to offer, it's for the better that he didn't touch Batman that much. That said, it's not like this is a terrible story. Although the second and third issues become extremely complex and poorly developed for a detective story, the first issue is, simply put, magnificent. What makes this issue so different from the rest of the story is that this issue is almost entirely silent. Except for a couple of words by Commissioner Gordon at the very end, this issue has absolutely no dialogue at all. John Byrne created the perfect atmosphere by developing the first issue with only images. The tension that this creates is fascinating, as we get to choose the pacing of the story any way we want. This is the first silent issue in the history of Batman, and I believe that it's so good because it all relied on the artist. Jim Aparo was already a household name in the Batman mythos, but if anyone ever doubted that the man could tell a story with only his amazing drawing skills, this issue is evidence enough to prove exactly that. Jim Aparo conveys everything using only his images. The facial expressions, the body language, the general atmosphere of Gotham are all perfectly illustrated by the great Jim Aparo. This man is, without a doubt, one of the greatest names in the history of Batman. All in all, The Many Deaths of the Batman is not an amazing story. The art is the best part of the whole thing, which is not saying much considering it's supposed to be a detective story. It also feels like a strange gimmick. The title of the story is obviously misleading. There was no way DC would kill Batman, especially not so soon after they killed Robin. It's like, what's next? The death of Alfred? Come on. At that rate, the Batman books would have been called The Lone Adventures of Commissioner Gordon. Seriously though, back then the supporting cast of the Bat books consisted of a butler and a police commissioner. Something needed to be done, and the folks over at Detective Comics had the right idea when they decided to make Batman team up with Etrigan, and that's what's going to happen in the next episode. So make sure to subscribe and come back to see what happens when the Bat meets the Demon. Until then, Godspeed, my friends.